The Wright brothers are two brothers who invented an aeroplane. And they were out there in the field. The aeroplane did not start by just flying when they started. They tried several times to make it finally fly. And there were people that were looking at them, and perhaps it was raining one day, and these guys were so determined that they said, we want to make this thing work. And some of the neighbors, and like you, were also looking and saying, these boys, what are they doing here? Maybe at one stage it was very hot, but they continued. And by the way, they continued for years until finally an aeroplane could fly. But there were a lot of criticisms. Some of the people were saying, we know the brothers, the Wright, we know the Wright family. We don't think there's any of them in their lineage that is mentally not right. But these two, we're starting to doubt them. It looks like there's one screw loose up here. Why are they? And by the way, I guess they even fell. Maybe this aeroplane, when it started, somehow it was, and finally it fell, and I guess they even had some blows. I guess they were even, maybe they even got some medical attention, but they never gave up. Some were saying, what are they doing? And they said, no, they say they want to fly. I say, what is that? Is there anything like flying on earth? We only know of birds that fly in the sky, but not people. If God wanted us to fly, he would have made us with wings. That's how people have been trying to criticize them and whatever the way they could. But guess what? Now we can have dinner at OR Tambo and have breakfast in London because of an aeroplane. This is the story that I wanted us to know, and many others, that we need people like the Wright brothers who were creative, starting something that was not known before, who were innovative, who were so motivated that they didn't want to miss anything, but to say, we are going to do what we want to do and make a difference. That is the story of the Wright brothers. They didn't give up. They continued until they had their breakthrough. Who of you have known of Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company? He failed and went broke 5 times before he succeeded. And now we are here using cars. And what about Winston Churchill? When we are talking about now the political arena. Churchill failed 6th grade. He was subsequently defeated in every election for public office until he became prime minister at the age of 62. He later wrote, never give in, never give in, never, 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 in nothing. Great or small, large or petty, never give in except in convictions of honor and good sense. Never, 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 never give up. I'm talking about people who made it those years, many years ago. And the last person that I should quote here before we continue is Thomas Edison. Have you heard about Thomas Edison? For those of you that haven't, he's the one who invented the light bulb. His teacher said he was too stupid to learn anything. Imagine being told by your teacher. He was fired from his first 2 jobs for being non-productive. Fired for being non-productive. As an inventor, Edison made 1,000 unsuccessful attempts at inventing the light bulb. How many? Unsuccessful. I don't want to ask you. Some of you could be already discouraged, having made only 10 unsuccessful attempts. And you say, no, this thing is not working for me. Or maybe even 20. You say, no, this is not working for me. But here is somebody, I mean, let's say he was having a family. Maybe he was not even getting support from the wife. I said, you're spending all this time in that room and we don't even have time, family time, because you said you want to invent something that never existed. You see, all these things happening, but he never gave up. Today, we can switch on and off the lights. These are people who wanted to make it against all odds. And what is the message? The message is very clear. Never, never, never give up. Continue to do something that will make this world a better place. Am I getting the message home? Yes. In order to be successful, there's something that you need to know. It's not automatic. It's not luck. Don't see somebody succeeding and say, oh, he's so lucky. There's no luck under the sun. Somebody has to sweat. Somebody has to burn that midnight oil. Somebody has to endure criticism, but you continue focusing on where you want to be. That is the message that we're trying to pass on. When we talk about success, what is success? Is there somebody who can just tell me in a sentence what success is all about? Any bold person who could just say what success is? Yeah, just. It's an ability to be able to fail and not lose your enthusiasm. Okay, that's very good. Where did you get that from? Oh my, there is somebody who has already gone through the notes. Okay, let's give him a round of applause. Do you know there are some who may not even open those notes from here? They go and put them in, it's a file number what? Is it number 19? Okay. That is what Winston Churchill said. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. I think I've already, whet your appetite that in whatever endeavor, in whatever plan, business plan or dream that you have, never think of failing, never dream of quitting because you didn't succeed first time. But then we are talking about entrepreneurship here. There are two types of entrepreneurs. I don't know if you have already started, in which of the two do you fall. There's what we call necessity-driven entrepreneurs. These are entrepreneurs that start a business because there's nothing else to do. They want to earn a living. They don't even apply their mind that much. They just said, okay, so and so is doing this. I think it's making some money. I think I could also get something. And then you just follow along. Like you just copy what other people are doing. And unfortunately, and I want to emphasize this, unfortunately, many people under the sun are necessity-driven. And we want to change the narrative. We need opportunity-driven entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs that look at the opportunities that are there. Entrepreneurs that will not just copy what other people are doing. Entrepreneurs that will be creative, that will be innovative, and meet all what entrepreneurship traits is all about. That's where we are coming in here. And I just want to very briefly talk about what is entrepreneurship. What are those characteristics of entrepreneurship? So that we say to ourselves, if we say we want to be opportunity-driven, do we meet the grade? Do we do what other people are not keen to do? Do we get out of the box, think out of the box, so that we can make a huge difference? Because when we talk about failure, I don't want to bore you with statistics. Many small businesses fail. On average, 50%. And there are areas where it goes even up to 80%. But in order to minimize that failure rate, we need to know what to do and spend more time thinking on what to do best, not necessarily copying what other people are doing. Hence, I'm talking about this. Let's very briefly look at what is entrepreneurship. And for a person to know what entrepreneurship is, you just look at the definition. And I'm not going to dwell much on the definition, but the first one, in terms of the definition, talks about is a process. Entrepreneurship is a what? A process. So in other words, if you think you have an opportunity where somebody says, if you do this today, you will be a millionaire tomorrow, do know that that is not entrepreneurship. That's a get-rich-quick scheme, and that ends up in pain. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, get your hands dirty and start the process. Go through all what is required in the process. And then I'm not going to go much deeper into that one. The second one talks about entrepreneurship is the ability to generate change through innovation. You tell yourself, am I generating change in whatever I'm doing? Am I finding new combination of resources? You should differentiate yourself from what other people are doing. And that will make you different. And that will make you succeed. You could be doing the same thing with Mr. Joe on the other side and Miss Ann on the other side, but you find yourself continue to succeed because you are doing yours differently. That's what I wanted us to know in this process. Having said that, I want us to look at this list of characteristics of entrepreneurship. Are they shown there? Let's go quickly to the characteristics of entrepreneurship or personality traits. And I'm not going to go through them, we don't have time. But it's very critical that we need to see this. Just quickly run them through so that we see all of them. Okay. We need time to go through each one of those. And where do we get these characteristics? From the very definitions, because there are so many definitions of entrepreneurship. That's why we are having that list. But why do I have to make this list of entrepreneurial characteristics? So that you gauge yourself. Do I meet what is required here? And I'm going to highlight only two. The first one, creativity and innovation. Tell yourself, I want to start this business, but am I creative enough? Am I unique in what I want to do? How different will I be from the other people that could be doing something similar? And as I said, I'm not going to elaborate more on that. We don't have enough time. But I want to quickly go to the second last one maybe, and it's called educated. Entrepreneurs are what? Educated. In other words, you should be able to read and write. And all of you here are still young. You can further your studies. And this time, I want to emphasize, there's formal education and informal education. And I want to emphasize on this part of informal education. You can educate yourself, self-education, self-learning. You can learn to an extent that you even sometimes know more than those that are professionally qualified. I get amazed when I see people that have only matric, but they've got more knowledge than people with degrees. There are people that are having only grade 10, but they are innovation and creativity and leadership. There is some of those that are well qualified academically. And this is the emphasis that I want to leave with you, that what is it that you are doing to educate yourself? If you say, I want to start a business, what is it that you are doing to learn more about that business? Do you know it's not only about how enthusiastic are you about this business, how passionate are you about this business, it's about the knowledge that you want to gain about this business? How much do you know about the market that you want to market your product or service? What have you done to search and screen and find out what your competitors are doing? That's when you will be distinguished from the rest. Am I still with you here? Yes. What research have you done? And you can only do that when you said, I'm going to study. I'm young, I'm going to sleep a few hours, and I'll be educating myself. I mean, let's give credit where credit is due, really. I think a number of you know the late Pastor Ray Macaulay. He was very upfront to say he only has standard 8. By then, I think it's what? Form 3. He used to say that. But I'm telling you, you will sit under his ministry and he will be telling you things that will change your life. Because of what? He studied. He didn't go to the university, but he will spend time studying what is going on around the world, studying what is going on. In other words, he will read magazines, he will read books, he will listen to tapes, and do a lot of things to enrich himself. And you say, I want to be an employer one day. You can hardly read a page in a week. You don't even know what is your competition of the business that you want to start. Am I talking to people here that will take this home? In other words, I'm not saying go to varsity, and I must emphasize go to varsity if you must. But if it happens that you don't go, there's so much that you can do to educate yourself. Do you know you can go to the bathroom with a newspaper, and when you are seated there working, you will also be reading. Okay, I think I've made enough of that. Then let's talk about the process very briefly, because I'm checking my time here. We're going to very briefly talk about the process, entrepreneurial process. There are 3 phases that we have to look at. And here are the phases. The first one is an idea phase. This is where I'm going to park. I'm not going to go further about planning phase and implementation phase. This we can spend hours and hours and maybe even weeks to talk about the idea itself. The reason why many businesses fail is because we don't interrogate the idea. What is it that we want to start? Who is the owner of Virgin Active? Who? Richard? I learned that he has got an island somewhere. And he says he goes there just to think. And he spent time thinking. And you just say, no, last night I thought of this business and my friend is also doing it and he's making big time. I'm going to follow him. That's not how it should be. You should interrogate time, thinking about what is it that I want to do. And when you do that, you will have to, you have to turn, because an idea in itself is not enough. You can be so motivated to start something here because other people are talking about it, but it's not enough. You have to say, okay, this is an idea, or this is a notion, and then from a notion, it's an idea. A notion is a lot of all these ideas coming to your mind. You don't even know whether this is right or wrong. Then you come up with this idea, and the idea itself is not enough. You have to now say, from these ideas, I need an opportunity. And then how do you check that this is an opportunity? There are ways where you can choose and say, okay, I have sifted the notion and the ideas. Now I have this opportunity. And I'm saying it's an opportunity because it meets all these grades that you can find that it does meet them. And I'm not going to go deeper into that. All I'm going to say is that when you have ideas, evaluate those business ideas. Evaluate those business ideas so that you know that you sift them, and finally you will find feasible business ideas and viable business ideas. As I said, I'm rushing into this so that you can come to understand what it is. And how do you identify business opportunities? I'm just going to say one or two, a few things that it will help you to say, okay, I thought I had an opportunity or business opportunity, but it's not because it doesn't meet this criteria. The first one, if you say you have a business opportunity, is it attractive? And I'm not talking about attractive to you. Is it attractive to the market? Will it sell? And then is it sustainable? You can start something that is not sustainable and then you not go anywhere. It might succeed maybe for a few years or so and then it dies down. And then is it timely? There's what we call window of opportunity. Are you entering this business when this window is opening, or are you entering the business when the window is closing in terms of the market, where you find you are starting this business, but in a few years' time, the window will have closed and you have no market? Is it a product or service? And why we're saying, is it a product or service? There are times that you find you start illegal businesses and it will not land you anywhere. Oh yes, it will land you somewhere. It will land you in jail. And the last thing in terms of the opportunities, value adding. Is it adding value? This is what I have. After having said all those, I want to challenge you by saying there are many businesses, but there are very few entrepreneurial businesses. There are many business ideas, but there are very few business opportunities. Let's just go to a table that shows about the differences that I'm just talking about. Business ideas on the one hand and business opportunities on the other. Can you see all those? They are there on your notes as well, but I want you to say, do I want to belong to the left or I want to go to the right where there are business opportunities? They are few, they are time specific, they will always translate into a business, they are risky, based on a window of opportunity, they are practical and desirable and attainable. And then, having said all those about entrepreneurial business and small business, there are many small businesses, but not all are entrepreneurial businesses. And let's check the difference in that before I sit down or before the program director calls me to step down. Just that table that shows about the difference. Then you'll tell yourself, do I want to be a small business person or do I want to be an entrepreneurial business person? Because there's a difference. Mr. Program Director, I think I should end here.
The presentations that were made earlier on by Professor Lazdani, they tell us a simple thing, a very simple thing, and which is what entrepreneur is that when people get together, it can be a village, it can be a township. As soon as they form a community, they are going to need the three basics: food, shelter, and clothing. No society, no community can continue without satisfying those three basic needs: food, shelter, and clothing. And that's how our entrepreneurs emerged in our townships. We as a people were put into these townships to be reservoirs of labor. The townships were hostels where people must go and sleep at night and wake up in the morning to go and work, either at the industrial sites by Umlungu, the mines, and so on. But the townships were constructed in such a way that we had to go there and sleep, wake up and go and work. But Human beings being human beings, they had to satisfy these three needs: food, shelter, and clothing. Now take yourself back to the old village before colonialism. You would find that there was the tribe, and then there would be a specific group, community, making up the tribe. Some would be planting maize, some would be breeding chickens, some would be doing livestock, whether it's goats, sheep, or oxen, and some would be building the huts, and some would be making sure that there's water, and some would be doctors, whether we call them traditional doctors or not. When this guy goes to that traditional doctor, what did he leave behind? Either inkukhu or whatever, in exchange for the services that he got. So we had entrepreneurship even before colonialism. Because no two households are self-sufficient, we then had the person who had inkukhu needed the maize, and there was butter. That was entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is a human activity. It is not something that was brought to us from over the oceans, but it's something that is with us. So our pioneers were driven by that spirit of satisfying a need in the community. And that is why then we are saying to you that in your communities, there will be some needs. And perhaps you are the person to come with a solution for that specific need. And those are the opportunities that you must look for and avoid the whole question of copycat entrepreneurship. Because if somebody has got a shebeen and then every other house in the street also now is a shebeen, I'm sorry about the example, but I'm just talking about what is a reality. The market does not grow because the number of shebeens is growing. Instead, the market gets smaller. We can see it in the taxi industry. Because the market is not growing exponentially, what is happening that they are fighting amongst each other for routes, and in other words, for business. And then when Uber comes in, then they start killing their Uber people. And yet, what they should say is, how do we counter Uber? How do we create an Uber of our own? Like our pioneers said, the banks are not serving us. How do we create our own bank? And today, we've got the African Bank. This is how I want us to think about. So when we go to the first slide, there's the whole question of, sorry. Oh, does this go off? Okay, yeah. So there's the whole question of opportunities are going to be in the environment. They are nowhere else, but they are in your day-to-day living. That's where the opportunities are. So, but our pioneers also face obstacles because the environment has obstacles. Today's obstacles, as you know, will become the people want protection fee. That's a big obstacle because they are taking from other people's sweat and they're not working for it. basibamba inkunzi. So that will be an obstacle, but there are enablers that you find in the environment. And because of those enablers, we find that entrepreneurship continues. Let's get to the next slide. Now, the overall the environment at the time was one of oppression and social exclusion. There was what was known as the Standard Principle, which said blacks are only in the urban areas to provide labor to their white bosses. That was the Standard Principle, and it was adhered to rigidly. And because of that, we were not given opportunities. But we're still, the white farmers in the rural areas were getting tough competition from the black farmers, because the black farmers, whether it was in the Wakongo, whether it was in Zanini, whether it was in KZN, in the Eastern Cape, had been farming in those areas for ages. So they knew what it was about. And then Ulungu, because he did not have to, he wanted to control everything, they came with the Land Acts. And those Land Acts stripped us of our land, and the people who then lost their farms and land had to come to the urban areas to come and look for jobs, which was the purpose of colonialism and so on. Now, this is history that you learned at school, and that you must always refer to, because if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you are going to. So this rural-urban migration was that created a demand for cheap labor. Next slide. So a lot of people came to this area looking for jobs, but very few were employed in the mines and in industry. The rest were simply unemployed. What more is that those who were not employed had nothing but that were staying in there, what were then known as squatter camps, informal settlements, and so on. Next slide. Because there was no help in these informal settlements, there were outbreaks of various forms of disease, whether the one that was there prevalent was bubonic plague. It started killing people. And because of this, it had to be raised to the ground. And then the people were then taken and relocated in a farm known as Klipspruit, south of Johannesburg. And that was then the creation of the township, because as they were in that Klipspruit, then they started building their own houses, whether it was shacks and so on, because they had now been relocated there. So that was the birth of the old empire. Next one. And then, but at the time, because blacks were seen as temporary people in the urban areas, so there were no facilities. But it became evident that this is not going to work. Then the law was changed, the Bantu Administration Act was changed to make provision, and that's why people my age will tell you about things like Ubuti when I was Section 10YA, Section 101B. If you ask your parents, they will tell you about those regulations, 101A and 101B. 101A were those with the right to be in the urban areas, 101A and 101B. And 101C and 101D did not have a right to have a special permit to be in the urban areas. This is where it comes from. But when they accepted that some of us had to be permanent in these areas, then Orlando Township was the very first official township with facilities, churches. Later on, when now our people were now aggressively becoming entrepreneurs, then they would have a shopping, some space for shopping center because they could not, as white business, satisfy the need in the township. Then they started relaxing the regulations. Now this is the history of the townships as we know them. So let us go. And then how did the proof emerge? We've got a document here that we're going to give out. Research that was done by Dr. Tim Kolo. People who were coming from Alexander Township and other black spots. Other black spots were places in Johannesburg. Johannesburg was seen as a white area. So when there is a concentration of blacks, like Soweto town, it was seen as a black spot. And therefore, those people had to be taken away and taken to the township. And that's why then Tikloof came into being, because of the people who were coming from Alexander and these other black spots. But the townships now had a new feature. They were now in terms of, no longer in terms of race, but they were now in terms of tribe. There was a section for Amaxhosa, section for Amazulu, section for Abesoto, section for Shangaan, and so on. Because now, Umlungu was now determined which I must divide these people, because when I've divided them, I can control them. So the divided rule principle stepped in. This is where we come from, and it is very important for you to be aware of these realities. Because when you're aware of these realities, then you get the strength, the resolve to say, we still have this poverty in our communities because of this past. It is my job now to make sure that there is a difference in the lives of our people. Next slide. So as I mentioned to you, entrepreneurship emerges when a community comes into being. Basic needs such as food, shelter, and clothing surface. This was the case in the township. But because there was an overpopulation, there was an abundance of people, the first business in the township, in addition, apart from food and clothing, was the letting of rooms. In the Bayama bedroom, it's an old industry. It started with the emergence of the township. So you find that in a place like Orlando, people would then, the house was built of bricks, and then they would have a bedroom, yamazenge, what we used to call amazenge at the time, corrugated iron. And then they would have that bedroom, and then they would let it up. And that's how then that became a very thriving business, because people were competing for these rooms. Rather than go in an informal settlement, they would stay in a room. And some of the people who were working had no place to stay. So these families then built these shacks, and that was a business opportunity for them. Let's go to the next slide. But what you must understand is that societies evolve. So whilst during those days we had amazenge, those things, and those were the forms of businesses that were there, the coffee carts. But as society modernized, as society progressed, the forms of business also improved. And these pioneers were at the forefront. And that is why when white entrepreneurs built Sandton City Eastgate or Westgate shopping centers. What did Maponya do? He built Maponya Shopping Mall. He was moving with the times. So you must also understand that you've got to move with the times, with the solutions, the opportunities that you identify. You must now use artificial intelligence to access your market. You must now use the fourth industrial revolution, because that's the limit. You've got to compete with the current entrepreneurs, whether they're white, Indians, or Somalis, as we are going to wear, and so on. Another big industry was the hair care industry. If I told you, look at the history of the hair care industry in the town, in the black community, there was a time when something that is known as a bebop was fashionable. What was known as a bebop. And then, yes, and then they would only have hair here, and then it was called a bebop. And so all the guys, people for now named bebop because they had to impress the ladies. That was the situation. And then there was a time when, because at the time the ladies, they stretch her in well because they've always had this long hair. And then there was a time when the guys now also started doing their hair and so on. Today it's even worse. They are competing now with the ladies. This is how entrepreneurship evolves. Entrepreneurship is not static.
We can also make an example of our former mayor, how he started the pen, Mashab. It actually put him in Mashab.
Yes.
It actually put in.
Yes. The PEMA, I'm not talking about the PEMA. What we call the PEMA. When in the past only the ladies used to look after their hair. Now all of a sudden the guys wanted to impress. Then then in terms of clothing, there was a time now when I'm a bell bottom. There was a time now when there were bell bottoms, and the guys were competing on my bell bottom up. Today is some time ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, my son said, no, he wants a trouser. And I went with him to the shopping center, and he chose the trouser and he came. And I said to him, Dana, don't you see that this trouser is torn? How can you want to buy a torn trouser? I had a fight with him in the shop, and I wanted to know from the shop owner, how can you sell torn trousers? I lost that fight. But what is the, then I was watching TV. Then I said, but you know, there's this young couple in child. What do I see? Umakoti has got a torn trouser. Long Kenyan has got a torn trouser. I said, it's lady. That's how dress has evolved and so on. So when you're an entrepreneur, you've got to look at what is going to make a difference. And from there on, you try and specialize in that. Because your job is to look for an opportunity and so on. Now, we then were the corner shop that started, and the corner shop became a grocery shop, and very soon we even had supermarkets. Those who are from Mufolo will know this is Mahlobo had a supermarket and so on. When you go to Orlando West, Maketa had a supermarket. When you go to Zola, you find that so and so had a supermarket and so on, because that was during our entrepreneurs were competing with those in other parts of in the cities and so on. Let us go on. So entrepreneurship, you must understand, is at the heart of development. As people build their businesses and government provides infrastructure, the lives of the people improve as they also create their own institutions for their development. Then, as I've said earlier on, African Bank was a result of this township entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs wanted to develop their own plan. Let's get to the next. The sectors. The most prevalent sectors, provision of foods and liquor. Clothing later became important. So all this was the retail sector. But as time went on, the construction, the builder started emerging, the electrician started emerging, the plumber started emerging. And as I've mentioned, there was accommodation for white, for their accommodation, letting of rooms. And then there was what we called at the time, iwashi. Because the white community, they could not wash their own clothes. They needed other people to wash their clothing. So that became a big industry in the townships. So I would wake up in the morning, because my grandmother was in that business, get into a cargo bus at 6 a.m., the first bus, number 4. So at 6 a.m., I'm already in town. I go to Parktown, because that was where the whites were and so on. Then washing Lapen Kogweni, and then I get into the bus, I drop it at home, and at 8 o'clock, I would be at school. And that was every Monday I would fetch the washing. Every Thursday I would take it back and so on. But what was happening is that my grandmother had ladies who were doing the washing, maybe Gaza, and others, maybe ironing. That was now her business. And she was paying those who were doing the washing, and she was paying those who were doing the ironing, and of course, what remained was her profit and so on. It was not only my grandmother, it was a lot of families, a lot of women in the town who were doing this washing and so on. It was a big business at the time. Today it is, we've forgotten about it, but now that's what I'm able to say. That made me who I am today, because I had to wake up in the morning, 4 a.m. I had to wake up. Like it or not, I had to wake up because I had to go and fetch washing, and then at 8 o'clock I had to be in school. Every Monday and Thursday. But as I spent today with grandmas, with all sorts of things. Those are the opportunities that are now, that you must now identify. Because there's this German philosopher, Joseph Schumpeter. He said, innovation is finding a new way of doing things. And that new way of doing things is the opportunity that you were waiting for. So, when there was COVID, all of a sudden, gloves were in big demand. Surgical gloves or the PPEs, they were in big demand. And a lot of young people started forming themselves into groups. I know it because we had a program for them and we're training them and so on. And some of them are now even in business active to this day, doing other things after starting with protective clothing and so on. That now doing because when they started, We told them that the COVID is not going to be here forever and ever. Let it be your starting point. And it was their starting point, and then they diversified into other things. And that's how entrepreneurs operate. Next slide. But what were the challenges faced by our pioneers? They struggled for permits and premises. All forms of resources were scarce, whether it was capital, whether it was space for their businesses, and there was numerous restrictions. There was one restriction that said the business that we're in has got to be only of this size, 350 something, and so on. Just self-contained. There were no toilets. You had to use the common toilets and so on. There was also a law, one man, one dog. You could not have a grocery shop and then also have a butchery. You only had to have one, either the butchery or the grocery shop. And these were the regulations that were there. Now what was going to come? Some of them were not educated. They had not been to school. They had not even been to school, but they survived. They survived and they built huge businesses. To add to this, the white entrepreneurs saw these black entrepreneurs like Omaponya, Omashrobo, as opposition, as competition, and they were always fighting them, making sure that they don't get the support that they should get from the government of the day. And the government of the day, because these white entrepreneurs were the voters, that government of the day made sure that it denies opportunities to black entrepreneurs. This was reality, but they overcame. Even those with no education, next slide. Some of them became good in business because they worked for these companies in town. And after working for Lomlungu for 5 years, you tell yourself, good day, then you go to Orlando, you start by airport, same what you were doing, you start yours in the. There was a lot of that happening. For instance, Uskota, we just did that. Stockfells and the selling of cattle were critical in providing finance. There was a stockfell who must decide. Then they would lend you money, and that money, you would start your business, and then you've got to pay it. So Stockfells played a very critical role in the evolution of entrepreneurship in the township. It was Moshagale after 1994, when they brought in what are known as co-ops. Instead of developing the Stockfells to be instruments of business, we brought in something known as co-ops from Germany. And that's why the Stockfells have not yet developed to play their rightful role in terms of now being providing funding for businesses, particularly for young people who will need this assistance from their families or from their communities. Fortunately now there is a bank that understands that and is providing that type of care. At the time, there was one major organization, it was the ANC. And the leaders in the ANC were also the people who were making sure that they drive entrepreneurship and so on. So the politics was now mixed with business and so on. Uskota was the Transvaal president of the ANC at the time. So the whole issue of entrepreneurship became part and parcel of our liberation struggle. And that's why as time went on, because now every township had a business association, then there was the Orlando Traders Association, there was the various traders associations, and then these then got together to form what was known as NAFCO at the time, and that was the formation of NAFCO, which NAFCO championed black entrepreneurship. Next slide. Women entrepreneurship also developed. They were severely restricted because of triple oppression, national oppression, tribal oppression, and also domestic oppression. That was the oppression of Omama. But they were not suppressed. Then they started operating, breaking through that. And food and clothing were their areas and so on. Then the bringing of African beer was a major industry. And it was the base of the fight between the white government, municipalities, and African women. Because the municipalities wanted to send African beer to pay for the services in the townships. And the African women said, I corner, this is our livelihood. So there was a big fight. The police were raiding our homes, these so-called places where the men go and drink. Then the people became clever. What they did was, this gear was put in a hole in the yard, and so on. And of course, also the women were also the powers behind the throne. Because as their husbands were running businesses, but it was the wife who said, no, this is what you must do. Our Mazwai, and so on. Now this is how entrepreneurship progressed. Next slide. With the removal of restrictions, our women can then get into the mainstream, but they were still mainly in the informal sector, and what was known at the time as Mikiti, Mafu, and Manyalo. They were providing food and so on. So next slide. Now let us look at the current business environment. The current business environment, we've got a highly concentrated economy. By highly concentrated economy, I mean there are one or two businesses in every sector, or even three. We've got a lot of monopolies in our country. A lot of monopolies. And a lot of monopolies, they suppress the emergence of other businesses because they can outcompete them. When you're a monopoly, as soon as you're a big bakery, as soon as there is this family that is going to make bread, and as soon as it grows, you are seeing putting A, and you are going to lose customers, and then you know what the price of bread is. Now that family cannot lower the price of bread because they are going to run at a loss, and then in no time they are out of business. So that is the reality of our economy, which is vertical and horizontal linkages. Now, you then have got to find ways in which you create a niche for yourselves. Because, amongst other things, our townships now have got foreigners dominating. I don't know how we allow these foreigners to come in and dominate, but they are there. Well, fortunately now, the government is busy with the registration process and looking at those who are not who are illegally in our country. But this does not mean that the situation is going to change overnight. Instead, it gives us the breathing space as local entrepreneurs to do what
Enter the
the
market.
entrepreneurs in Tanzania did. The Somalis were dominating some of the village in Tanzania. So the business community had a meeting, the Tanzanians. They said, asizohlolwa abantu abavela kwenye indawo endaweni yethu. They came up with a strategy on how to outsmart these Somalis. They did not come with Dudola. Dudola is a sign of primitiveness. It means that you are not using your brains. It means that you are not using your brains. You want to use your brawn. The Tanzanians use their brains. And then they said, for instance, our pensioners, particularly pension this time of the year, this time of the month. So all that we need to do is that we deliver their needs. They don't have to go, but we deliver. About another scholar, this is what we can do. When there is a wedding, this is what we'll do. When there is a funeral, this is what we'll do, and so on. So all those strategies at specific niches, whether it's a wedding, then amongst everything they said, well, who to buy as a group. So there was bulk buying. In no time, the foreigners had been outcompeted and they left. This is your challenge now, to say, how can we outsmart these Somalis, Pakistanis, and Bangladesh who are here? Because they cannot be cleverer than you in your own area. They just can't. You know your market better than anybody else. You've got to be very aggressive. Next slide. So the township landscape now, there's a lot of informal businesses. How do we get a number of informal businesses getting together so that they can formalize themselves into a business and so on? Fortunately, we have somebody here from SARS who, when we have time, will explain to you that as you formalize, as you form your business, what are your obligations to the country? Because SARS needs those taxes to be able to pay the nurses, to pay the police, to be giving you all the teachers and so on. So we as business people have got that developmental role to play and so on. But as I mentioned, we've got to run away from copycat entrepreneurship. We've got to look at the shopping malls. The shopping malls are in our township. They're not breaking a law. They are legally in our areas. In terms of the law, the shopping malls are there. Not only that, but they employ our people who are in the townships. And our people don't want to get into a taxi to go to town, to buy, to go to a pet store, and so on. But what you, as a township entrepreneur, must say, how can I get an opportunity in the shopping mall? What is it that I can do? Either perhaps with one of the big shops who are there, they sell vegetables. Am I able to plant my own vegetables and then they buy from me? These are the ideas that must be circulating amongst yourself. I've already spoken about the immigrant entrepreneurship. What I can say about immigrant entrepreneurship is it's a global problem. Everywhere you find immigrant entrepreneurs, whether it's in New York, whether it's London, that's our corner. And there's no Dudola in London or New York or in many other places, Cairo and so on. Why should we have a Dudola here in South Africa? Let us stand on.
Yeah.
So then the government has got our township strategy. That township strategy is a facilitator, is an enabler You young people must study that township strategy so that you can see the opportunities and the support that you can get from the development agencies that the government has created. Next. The current environment has challenges and needs. The needs become our opportunities. The challenges like protection fee are there. You've got to find a way of saying, how do we deal with this issue of protection fee? Because we know the people who are charging, who are doing this protection fee and so on. The huge change, I've spoken about them, and the government, crucial government, has got these opportunities. Last slide. Next slide. I spoke about the German philosopher. These are the 5 entry points for the private sector. A new market, a new way of producing, technology, and artificial intelligence. Those are the opportunities that are there. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was my presentation for today. And all that I'm saying that you have got the brains. You have the brains. You can take it, and there is a bank that is ready to hold your hands and take you to the promised land. Thank you very much.